Hello, hello. Welcome to What's Working Now. I am your host, Katie Richardson, coming in from Puerto Rico. I don't know if you heard, but I and my family made a move. I got the beach in view, and I'm talking to two incredible entrepreneurs. These are literal brothers from Venezuela who were both exceptional soccer players. That soccer playing brought them to the US, and very quickly they were like, hey, we want to be enterprising. We want to generate some income for ourselves, for our family. And the thing that you're going to love about them, they also wanted impact. These are guys who are not going to just go out and make money. They wanted to do it in a way where it utilizes their gifts, their talents, their abilities, allows them to be together as brothers, allows them to have a family. Today, we're talking to the awesome and the amazing Luis and Fonzi.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that kind intro, the kind words.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. And I should tell everybody, you guys have an incredible podcast called Content is Profit. These guys know content very, very well. We're going to dive into that, dive into your story. So if you are an entrepreneur who needs to understand how to leverage content in today's world, you need to pay attention to today's podcast. We're going to dive into that. We're going to dive into their story, how they help people, things that they see that other people don't see, how they're optimizing opportunities. So first of all, give everybody a sense for, here's the question I have for you. Tell us the story, and you're going to have to pick between the two of you, but what is the story of a moment that has shaped how you view the world today?
Fonzi, you can take that. I'm gonna throw you under the bus on this one.
This is like going into the field cold. We haven't even warmed up, and it's like, bam, your first opportunity to score a goal right here.
Yeah.
There's a few, I would say. Probably one of the first ones was actually when my brother left home for the first time. He's the older one. I gotta clarify that from the very beginning, you know. And he left when he was 15. I was 12. And for me, that was like a little bit of a shock, right? It's like, wow, like you can leave home at 15 to chase your dreams, right? He was moving to Italy by himself to play soccer. And we, both of us, crazy soccer fans. We just grew up playing soccer our whole life. That's what we wanted to do. And I remember just crying at the airport and thinking to myself, I want to go on my own. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to go be independent and, you know, achieve my goals. That year of my life has probably been one of the years that I worked the hardest. Like, as soon as I would come back from school, I would go to the yard and just like practice, right? And in my mind, I was like, I just want that freedom that my brother is experiencing. So that was a pretty big moment for me in the sense of, you know, it doesn't matter your age. You don't have to wait to be an adult. You can just go and chase your dreams, right? And you can go and do it on your own. So those are things to this guy right next to me. Yeah, that was a pretty special moment.
Yeah, that is. It's such a young age to have your eyes open, to have that emotional experience of, wow, I want to pursue my dreams. Like, I can only imagine what that kind of unlocked in your very young mind. And just to make sure everybody's clear, we're talking to two Luises that are physical brothers. They are biological brothers, but we're going to call you Fonzi, right?
Yep.
And then Luis, who's the older one, we're calling you Luis. Okay, so Luis,
sexy beard is Fonzi. Sexy beard and sexy voice.
Sexy beard is Fonzi. So Luis, I want to hear your version of that story. I mean, leaving home at 15 to go to another country. Wow. Tell us about that. What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we come from a country, obviously, that soccer is not the first sport. Baseball is the main thing. So opportunities kind of flock to those main sports. And, you know, we grew up watching soccer, playing, and that was a dream. And we did everything possible, and our family did everything possible to provide those opportunities, meaning we will go to 2-3 practices per day. We will have like special programs. We will try to apply for scholarships. We will recycle paper and plastic to pay for the tickets that ultimately led us to Italy, for example, right? So that was the dream. And since we were like 3 or 4, that we told our dad we want to play soccer for a game, like he took that very passionately, and he dedicated his entire life for us to do that, right? He would drive us to the practices. He will be there. He will be with us training on Sundays. So that built this character, right? That sometimes we didn't even want to go practice, but we had to do it because the dream was so big, and we had to make sure that we do that. So when I was 15, I was presented with that opportunity to go and try out for a few teams, and I was selected in one of those teams in Italy. And in my eyes, that was like, wow, over the last 10 years I've played, and this is the one thing in my mind. And we talked about manifestation and different things. And that was the stage of my life that started. And I was like, I am living the dream. So for me, it was very exciting. I'm not going to lie. The second I landed though in Italy, I knew no Italian. No, there were two random dudes waiting for me in the airport they were going to drive me to this town. It was a 25,000 people town in the south of Italy. And it was like a 4-hour drive. And I remember sitting in that plane and be like, can we turn around? I was very scared. I was freaked out.
Yeah.
But I remember like, that's the dream. That's the thing that we got to do. And we are supposed to feel that way. And I try to like label it as excitement instead of being nervous. Right. And then that's when the thing started. And then, a few years later, we were there for a year. Things went crazy. I had to go back home. And then at 18, I went back to Spain for another year. So, but in my eyes was living the dream. We worked so hard to do this, and it became a reality, right? And then that experience led to many others, and then that's why we're here in the US, chasing the dream. So
yeah, it's really incredible to see at what a young age you guys developed this ability to define your dream, the vision of the future that you wanted, and then this level of discipline and commitment to do what was required to develop the skill set to go after that dream, right? And then as it's all unfolding and happening, you also have this very human response, which is like, oh, wow, my dreams are happening. And there's almost this like, what do I do now? And having the fear of, can I go back? And I know that just as I look at high performing entrepreneurs, I frequently see such a parallel between high performing athletes and high performing entrepreneurs, right? And so in some ways, the fact that you were both these high performing athletes, it in so many ways prepared you perfectly for where you are right now, to be these entrepreneurs who are helping other entrepreneurs to magnify their message, amplify the content that they're currently creating, and to push it out into the world, which I think is it's really cool to replay that story and experience.
Yeah, as you're saying this, a thought comes to my mind, which is we identify as, soccer players our whole life, that honestly, when that was over, right, when we realize, oh, there's no more soccer, what's next? I personally, right, I cannot speak for my brother, but I personally kind of like lost my identity there for a little bit, right? And even though you talk about, you have a goal, you have a dream, and you can go and chase it. When you're lost, it's very difficult to define that next dream, maybe, right? And so when, for example, my personal part of the story is I came here to the US when I was 18, right, on a scholarship to play soccer. I had a so experience playing college soccer, right? And one year I was actually transitioning to a new school, and I spent the summer here in Jacksonville, Florida. That's where we are right now. I was visiting my brother, and that year a new professional team opened up in Jacksonville. And I remember just telling myself, I'm just going to go try out to see where I am physically. And, technically I just want to test myself. Yeah. And they ended up picking me, right? And I was like, what? They're picking me to play on this professional team. This is awesome. This is insane, right? Like, this is my dream. So when they realized that I was an international player, they told me, hey, look, we really like you, but as an international player, it's going to be way more difficult for you to make it because they have limited amount of spots for international players. And they told me, so it's up to you whether you decide to, stay or go to your school. It was pretty tough. That was a week before I had to go to my new school. And I decided to stay here. I was like, I'm going to take this opportunity once in a lifetime. And after about like 6 months or so, the coach, in one of the practices, he grabs me, he puts his arm around me. He's like, let's go for a walk. I was like, oh no. Like, I know what happens to every single player that he tells us go for a walk. And that day he was like, hey, it's not going to work out. Like, we really like you and everything, but unfortunately we cannot offer you a contract. And I was like, wow. Yeah, I was like, it's okay. Like, those practices were early in the morning, and I was like, thank you. I appreciate it. This has been the best experience of my life. I remember going back to, at that time, I was staying with my girlfriend. I was like, I used to go home. It's like 7 a.m. I start eating cereal. All of a sudden, I'm like, the cereal's kind of salty. I just realized my tears, kind of like falling into the cereal. And I'm like, what's next? Like that's what was in my mind. I'm like, what's next? And it actually took me a very long time and I feel like I'm still adapting in a way, but it took me a very long time to figure out like, okay, I want to do something on my own, right? I want to go pursue something, with my brother as a partner and see what we can build for ourselves. But, even though you can have that drive to achieve a dream, sometimes when that initial dream is lost, might take a while to, find the next one or, get some momentum.
Okay, you brought up two really good points here. Because what I was going to say is it looks beautiful, right? And shiny and perfect, but I know that that's not the way it actually plays out in real life. And so there are these bumps in the road, these unexpected roadblocks, and it looks like we're going to achieve our dream, and then something pops up and happens, and the coach puts his arm around you and says, look, we like you, but we can't bring you onto the team, right? So there's definitely that. And then there's this other component that you brought up, which is identity. And, you had grown up with this excitement and this belief that I'm a pro soccer player. And that identity got you really, really far. And at some point, it was time to get out of that vehicle of playing soccer and into a new vehicle. And there is a loss there. And anybody who has built a business and that business either failed, didn't go where they thought it was going to go, had to pivot and change, can absolutely relate to all of these things that you're talking about, Fonzi. So, I don't know who to ask here, but as you guys went from this identity of being pro soccer players and really pursuing that dream that you'd had from such a young age, and then moving into education and starting to realize you wanted the freedom of business and entrepreneurship and navigating all of that. Tell us the story of how you started to make that shift, because I know that it's not easy.
It's been a few years in the making. So similar to what Fonzi experienced here in the States, I experienced in Spain, and I was 18 at the time. And there was a period of like 6 months that I had a really, really bad coach that made a very bad influence on me. Like it made me hate the game. And I was very, very close to my objective. I even tried out to a professional team, but because of that experience, I was 18. I was like, look, this is not what I want to do anymore. So to me, that was like the break of the relationship with the sport at that level. And what it caused was also, like Fonzi said, that loss of identity, but also I came back home to a country, a third world country, right? That we were trying to leave because of the opportunities, right? So I came back there and my dad didn't speak to me for about 6 months. It was really hard. And trying to find that, right? What happened is I started going to college. You were in high school at the time. But what it created in my mind was like, I need to go try different things to see what I'm going to like next, because I'm not going to go play anymore. So what happened though, was after 2 years of trying these things, I ended up working with a company that you might've heard. I worked with Red Bull at the marketing level in college. It was so fun, but also it put me out to experience these things. Right. Yeah. But then the political situation went crazy, and we used the soccer as a vehicle to escape. Now, when I got here to the States on a soccer scholarship, there's still a route to be a professional, but in my mind, that was not the goal anymore. The goal was, let me play for this for years so I can go to school, finance my school, and see what I'm going to do next. So that started a series of decisions like, what am I going to do? So as international students, right? Fonzi's college was a little bit different because his focus was still on soccer. But for me, it was, let me get as many jobs as possible, experience these things to see where am I going to go. I ended up doing like ropes course coordinator. We went rock wall, different things. And it tend to be very active jobs instead of sitting on a desk on a computer doing some things. So I started to learn what I really like or what I really enjoy doing, the process, which was one of the things in the past that was like, well, I'm not really enjoying this process. I don't see myself continuing this process to achieve that goal, even though that goal is like the thing that I really, really like. I don't think I'm willing to endure this. So let me enjoy that process. And that thought process started to kind of bring different opportunities, and entrepreneurship started to show up. So how did it start to show up? Different programs online. We started a sticker company. We did vinyl stickers. So we did door-to-door sales on stores selling these vinyl stickers. We realized very quickly that we needed to sell a ton to actually make some money. But then we bought a screen printing machine, and we did screen printing from the garage of our house in 90-degree weather in Florida. That was not pretty. Same thing. We didn't enjoy the process, but we did enjoy the relationships. And we're like, okay, how can we leverage this? And it evolved over the years. And this is probably 6-7 years now that we tried different things, to where 2 years ago, we found this vehicle of podcasting and content, and we really enjoyed the process.
Yeah.
So it was, okay, what are the things that we can try, that we can jump on and enjoy doing it? Because if we're not enjoying doing it, we're not having fun, this is probably not going to be worth it at the end. Yeah. So that has been a process of trying things, what sticks for us. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, and then if we enjoy it, then the people that we help are going to enjoy it too. So that has been the process very quickly, the summary of the last 7 years, pretty much.
That's so good. And one of the things that I want to make sure people see and understand as you're telling this story is sometimes we can become very attached to our business, our sports, our products, our services. We can identify with it so much that it feels like it is our identity. And then when we lose that thing, it feels like we're losing ourselves. And what you just explained, Luis, is you started to realize that soccer was a vehicle. And it was a vehicle that could get you a scholarship to go to school where you could gain an education. And even the sticker business and the screen printing business, those were vehicles for you to discover what you were excited about, what you were really good at. And I think that's a really important thing for any entrepreneur to learn here, is that your business is a vehicle. It's a vehicle, and that allows you to put your magic into the world, but it is not you. And when the business has to make a shift and a change, or maybe even the business fails and it's time to create a new one, you're just getting out of one vehicle into another. Like, you yourself are still intact.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a sense, when we started publishing, that's exactly what happened to us, because people come to us and like, okay, I'm going to start a podcast, for example. Right. And, we understand now that podcast attraction is, it depends on consistency, like how consistent we're in publishing, how consistent we're in creation. And people think maybe it's like an overnight thing that we can do this. But what we discovered through, I think 240 plus episodes now, is like just the act of sharing those thoughts and connecting with people is what grabs more traction. And, the direction that our business took as soon as we started publishing is not related to the amount of downloads that it was, the impact was because of the relationships that we started to build, because of the opportunities that started to show up, and in business is the whole thing. So we entered like thinking A was the way, because we're like, okay, we're going to create content. Maybe how can we go viral? How can we do this? Right. And maybe that's not a question that we asked many times, but immediately the feedback was completely different with the guest. And we're like, oh, this is great. And then we adapted very quickly to that. And that's what changed. And that's what guided the business for the first 2 years. And that what allowed it to explore. And then, so a lot of the people that come to us, right, the publishing act is going to be like completely evolution. As soon as you start publishing, you're going to get feedback. And we're like, okay, how do we adapt? Road A or road B, right? And we choose road B. And then, okay, here, how are we going to adapt? And we related a lot to like our business story and how we were able to like birth this thing out of nothing, right? And we're like, okay, sweet. Okay, now we understand that it is a process and it is going to happen day in and day out. And it's been fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys are crushing it with this. And I know some of your clients, they're some of my clients as well. And I know personally, obviously I have a podcast. There's only a certain number of hours in a day that an entrepreneur, especially the CEO, the leader, the founder, can put towards building their business. And the idea of leveraging something that they're already doing to really magnify their message, to attract their ideal customer and client, like that's very exciting and interesting to any CEO entrepreneur. And like, in my opinion, this is the magic of what it is that you guys are doing, is you're helping them magnify that message. So as we think about, and I want to kind of like transition into you and your expertise in really multiplying people's content and really sharing it in the world, what are some things that people should know about content creation, but nobody's talking about?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Honestly, I feel like we're still exploring that a little bit. I will tell you something that we've learned that has become kind of like a foundation of what we do, that I feel like people get confused a little bit, especially when deciding to create content, right? And I think it's just something that you see a lot online, and then when you try to put it yourself into action, right, it executed, you just get confused and overwhelmed, right? And it's the fact that you see a lot of people publishing a lot everywhere, right? And I'm going to give the most common example probably, which is Gary Vaynerchuk, right? That he's everywhere and he's like, publish, just go everywhere. And, people decide to take that advice just too hard and try to be everywhere at all times. And that becomes very, very overwhelming, right? We try to do the same thing. And guess what? It's just not possible because you don't have the capacity, right? Especially if you're trying to run a business and you have clients, you got to fulfill, and then you turn around and you try to do this, and then, right, you just get all confused and don't end up actually doing anything, or what you end up putting out into the world doesn't have any purpose, doesn't serve anybody, not even the people you're trying to help, or not even yourself. So for us, something that we realized at it was kind of the hard way, we're actually pitching our service to this business, right? And we're like, yeah, we're going to do this and that, X, Y, and Z. This plan is amazing. We can do it all for you. And they were like, okay, this is awesome, but where's your stuff, right? Like, we didn't have anything because we tried to be everywhere. And then since we couldn't be everywhere because we didn't have the capacity, we decided to just don't do anything with content on our end. And then we were pitching content, right? We weren't like walking the talk, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And they turn around and they said, where's your stuff? And that really hurt for us. We're like, ooh, yeah, we're not putting anything out there, right? That hurts. And that's when we started looking at each other and we started just asking ourselves, how can we be consistent, right? Like, consistency is going to be number one. And we, just by asking that question, we started evaluating what we've done in the past and, how we got it wrong. And a lot of those things, I'm going to raise my hand, they point back at me, which is like perfectionism, right? It's like, I was just trying to get it so perfectly out there, the quality, just everything, right? And at the end of the day, we decided, and that's kind of when we set on our mantra, which is quality of the message over quality of the production. And then as we started doing that, just focusing on the message, right? It's like, let's go live on Facebook for 45 days in a row. And we just did that challenge. Funny enough, we actually didn't finish the challenge. When we got to like day 15, somebody came in and they were like, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I love what you guys talk about. Would you come into a content dinner at my house? And my brother went there. And at that time, that became the biggest deal that we've made. And we're like, this is awesome. So then we shift again our attention into fulfillment, neglecting a little bit or content. And then we said ourselves, why are we trying to complicate it again? Let's go back to simple. Let's go back to consistent message over production. And we did again the 45 live. Another client came out of that, right? So every single time that we look at it, we're like, it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. You just need to do it on a consistent basis. Now, we were talking to one of your, I don't know if you're still coaching her, Catherine Jones, right? But she's absolutely amazing. Yeah. And we were actually at her podcast. And as we were explaining this, kind of like the main framework now of what we do came alive. And she's like, ooh, this is like a publishing pyramid, right? And the base of it is that messaging, then comes a consistency. And while you're doing that, you start realizing that you have certain capacity, right? Between creating content, fulfilling your work. And then as your business grows, you start getting more resources, and then you can reinvest that into your publishing pyramid. And I think that's something that it is stuck in a sense, right? But I feel like a lot of people just fall into, I want the perfect content right off the gate and I want to be everywhere. When in reality, you just got to be what we call relative omnipresence, right? You don't have to be everywhere. You just have to be in front of the people that you want to talk on a consistent basis. So if they're on Facebook, just go and speak a lot on Facebook, right? If they're on LinkedIn, just go and publish consistently on LinkedIn, but focus on that quality of the message, and then the quality will follow.
So good. So here's some of the things that I'm hearing you say. Be consistent. Like that's absolutely critical and key. Keep it simple. I think too often as dreamers, visionaries, we can overcomplicate things and then it just takes a little bit of perfectionism to keep us from executing on the plan. So keep it really simple and then ensuring that you have a quality message as your foundation.
Yep.
Love this. Love this.
Yeah. There's sorry,
Oh,
Kate.
no, go ahead.
There's a division between perspective on content too. Like we see all these creators, right? Like let's say people on YouTube that's their thing. Like that's what they do. The creator economy, they call it, right? And it's like they monetize through advertising on YouTube, right? That what YouTube pays them, right? And then there's a business, right? So these creators are optimizing their content in many ways to the platform, to serve the platform, because they look at all these metrics like click-through rate and what people are looking at and what type of audience and these things, right? And then when we have a business, something solid, let's say, that we're trying to sell something and we try to emulate that, it's going to crash, right? So now the question is like, how do we create something first that is fulfillment for me? We talked about process and enjoying that process. How can I actually create something that I enjoy so I can keep doing that over time, right? Yeah. That serves the people that I currently serve inside of my business, right? Yeah. At first, that has to be like the solid base, that the messaging that Fonzi was talking, instead of chasing all those metrics, right? And we've heard different people, and for us, for the first 6 months of the show, we didn't look at any numbers. We're like, we cannot go there because that we understand, we identify that that's a thing. If we see it, it might discourage us. We cannot see it, right? So close that computer. We're just gonna go execute. So how do, as a business, right? How can we like fly like in the middle of those two that you actually enjoy doing it? I'm sure like you feel very fulfilled creating this podcast and connecting with incredible people. For some people, it's going to be podcasts. For some people, it's going to be TikTok videos. For some other people, it's going to be YouTube. It's like, how do they enjoy the process? And for us, that's what we found in the podcast. And that's why podcast is our main vehicle. It's because we really enjoy doing it. And it's very low friction for us to create.
What you're highlighting, I think, is something that's so important. As entrepreneurs, we're getting pulled in so many different directions, and our energy is it's a critical piece of the puzzle. And so what you're talking about is making sure you're conserving your energy, you're eliminating drag, you are being in a place that excites you, where your passion can really have a place to develop and flourish. And so for you, like you said, that's podcasts. I think there's so much wisdom here, Luis, because there's so many different models for how to grow and develop your business, right? You could start a YouTube channel, you could write a book, you can create a free PDF, you can have a funnel, you can have a webinar, you can, I don't know, lots of different products and services. And I think what people need to really understand is there's a lot of different ways to build a business, but you've got to put yourself in a place, especially inside of your business, especially as the founder and CEO, you've got to put yourself in a place where you are energized. And you guys figured that out. It took a little bit of trial and error, but you figured it out. And then you're even working with other podcasters as your clients because it's a world you love, you're passionate about, and you understand.
Yeah, we always tell the team, we're like, guys, don't worry about it, because if we don't have any clients one day, you guys are still going to be with us, because we're never going to stop doing the podcast. Like whether it's this one or some other one, like it's just a lot of fun, right? For us, the main benefit is just connecting with great people, right? Just building these awesome relationships. Mm-hmm. I mean, we met you through a relationship that we built through the podcast. Yeah. And who introduced us to our common friend was somebody that we had on the podcast as well. Like pretty much every single friend, or like 90% of our friends that we've made in the previous year and a half has been through the podcast. Or my girlfriend and his wife, they don't believe we got too many friends. We're like, I promise. They're just, all around the world.
All over the world, yeah.
Well, and you guys are highlighting something that's really important in business, and that's relationships, right? And when you can make this very human connection with somebody, and a podcast is a fantastic way to do it and to develop that relationship. And when you have that relationship, that emotional connection, it's very easy to make introductions, to offer different value to people, offer your products and services.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been honestly number one in our list, like besides anything, is how do we go and build awesome relationships with awesome people? And I'm that type of person. Well, I'm gonna change those words. I was that type of person that felt that reaching cold to somebody was a little sketchy, right? Or I didn't know the proper way to do it, or how to add value up front to the relationship, right? So that other person would want to connect with me. And as soon as we started doing the podcast, that changed. I was like, this is such an awesome way, because I know we're delivering so much value to the other person, and we're just creating a space for us to connect in a deeper way, right? Regardless of if we do business or not after that, right? Like, we are just connecting and we become amazing friends. And, we've had an awesome experience with our common friend too, George Bryant, right?
Yeah.
And we've brought him to the podcast once, and I feel like we were all crying on that one. And they were
all
like,
3 times.
Yeah, we're like, George, this is amazing. And we brought him a few times, right? And one day he just reached out and he's like, hey guys, I love your energy. I would love for you to MC the event that I'm going to host in Montana. We're like, what? We've never MC before. Are you sure? He's like, absolutely. I want you guys there, right? So, it was just a strictly friendly transaction right there, and based on the relationship that we built. And just like that, we've done over 240 episodes now. Over 200 of those have been interviews, probably. Mm-hmm. So, we got like over 200 really good friends that we've created a good experience with.
Yeah, so good. I'm sure as you bring on clients and you start making sense of all of their content and they're getting familiar with their team, I'm sure through your experience, the quote, right way to do it, or the way to do it that's simple and focused. What are some of the mistakes that you see people making when it comes to producing content?
Good question. There's a few that come to mind. I think one is rushing. The way that we used to create content, because of the platforms, and this is something that came up very recently, like this weekend, actually, with one of our agency partners, is we think about something, we create, and then we publish immediately, right? Mm-hmm. So then try to keep up that speed. It's really challenging, right? And you hear a lot of YouTubers talk about the hamster wheel of the content creation, right? And let's say you publish one video a week, like the whole week is pretty much ideation, the production, if they have a team, the meetings with the team, post-production, record, like that's their life. And that's why they're not able to monetize frequently through other methods, right? Because that's the one thing, all their capacity and all their energy is in that. So now as entrepreneurs, and we started, it was just us, just me and Fonzi. So, right, we're like, okay, how do we create a system, right, that we can actually do it once, and then it's like that we can leverage that, right? So that's the initial question. So a lot of people try to stay into that cadence. So that in my opinion, I think that's mistake number one. We got to figure out a system within your own company that you can operate at a high level of energy, and then using the resources, how can you figure that one out? Now we have a framework of our own called M2M, right? Macro to micro. And that's just last month, we just published probably 500 something pieces of content across multiple platforms. It's a big number, right? And guess what? We're testing, right? And we just started publishing something called YouTube Shorts, right? And over the last 2 days, we got like 2,000 something views. And we're like, oh, wow, that might be an indicator of like that thing is working. So now we're rethinking what we call the map, right? The output of that one video to focus on that, because the numbers now that we're in a position where we can actually look at the numbers and see those numbers as indicators, not depending on them, but we're like, oh, okay, well, this worked. Let's see, can we try more there? Well, now the system, we have the space to think and adapt to that. So if we're so busy into the day-to-day creation and the hamster wheel of like, I gotta create tomorrow 10 reels, 10 TikToks, right? Because I cannot schedule them. I'm like, it's so crazy. Then we don't have the space to think about these things and be creative and be like, what else can I do that I actually enjoy to continue to create? Because if I don't enjoy it, then I'm not going to be connected to the process, and then it's going to fall apart. So it's really challenging. I'm going
to add a few, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I was taking my time to write them down here. If you can tell.
Yeah.
So, what my brother's talking a little bit is kind of like that lack of systems. I feel like a lot of people don't really take the time to systemize how they're going to create the content and how they're planning it out, and then actually take action on it and have some wiggle room, right? Because You need your creative rest. Let's be honest, right? We cannot always be hustling. Then the other thing is people creating out of their zone of creation, if you want to put it that way, right? Some people love to write. Some people love to be in video. Some people prefer just to do the podcast without video whatsoever. And, I'm all for, yes, go outside of your comfort zone and grow. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, there's one of these ways to create content that is going to be the best for you, right? And I think just use your strength, right? If you are a great writer, cool, write amazing content, right? And this is where it's key, not just write amazing content, but how can you create a community piece, if you want to put it that way, right? Like, how can we use leverage in our content, right? Or relationships. For example, if we write a piece on the podcast that we recorded the other day, of course, we're going to tag you. And guess what? Whether you share it or not, it's totally fine, right? We do it without expectations. But if you do decide to share it, nice. We're leveraging now part of your audience, I guess, to see the message as well, right? So it's these little things. So don't just go at it alone, and don't just write about your thoughts, which, again, it is great and it does have its place, but go at it as a community. Like, how can I include my community in this, right? How can I distill the lessons that I learned from Katie, right? And create a post about this, or a video about this, or even a extra podcast episode about this, and then publish it. So those are like the main ones. And I just want to put it here, for us, is all about leverage, right? It's about having the platform, the podcast, bringing a guest, build that relationship. That same thing can be done across, like, it doesn't have to be a podcast. Again, if you prefer writing, guess what? I can call you, Katie. I have this piece that I want to do on identity and committed choices. And I want to have a conversation with you because I know you are the expert about it. And I'm going to write it and I'm going to publish it to all my audience on LinkedIn. And not just that, I'm going to put some money behind it. So some other people, get to find about this piece. And I'm going to be just talking all about you as well. Right? Would you be willing to come into that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, we're using leverage, and at the same time, we're using our zone of creation, right? So that's what I feel like people are missing sometimes, is the fact that since we are so used to see the same thing, right? Maybe I'm just consuming YouTube videos, or that's all I'm seeing, or I go on LinkedIn and I just see 1-minute videos. I feel like that's the only way to be successful. But there's actually many ways, right? There's not just one way to be successful with content, but at the bottom of it, you got the quality of the message and that consistency.
Yeah. Okay. So good. So good. If there's somebody out there who's listening who is producing some content and wants to create more, what are 1 or 2 simple, easy, fast ways that they can start to multiply their content creation?
Yeah, absolutely. They can reach out to us first, and we can answer through.
As they should. Yeah.
At BizBrosCo on Instagram. But no, but really,
step 1 is reach out to you guys, and no, I'm serious. Like, have a team do it, right?
Yeah. So if you have enough resources where you can allocate and have that team do it, perfect. But also, what I'm about to say is that you need your own framework of content creation, right? You got to understand, like, how do you create content? And then it's like, what is the desired output, right? So for example, our thing, I just said a massive number of posts. Well, each podcast episode has actually 8 individual pieces in different formats, right? Okay. So, okay, now we can communicate that format, what we call content map, to our team, and then they can develop it and then distribute it, right? So how we see the content is, okay, macro, which is our main piece of content, decide on what the output is for that, decide what platforms you want to put it. Start simple, start small. For us, the 45 Live was Facebook and LinkedIn. That's it, 2 pieces of content. And then it started to evolve. Once you master not just the creation, but the distribution, because a lot of people create and then that sits in their drives. Once we master, hey, I'm publishing consistently for 2-3 weeks, this output of content, then we can add another piece of content. Be like, sounds good. Out of this video, can I add a third idea, right? And then you can communicate that to your team. Guys, you know, this map that has 3 pieces, well, we're adding a 4th one. And then you can communicate with the person that does the distribution. We're publishing one more. If there's no team, is you start measuring your time. We actually like started to clock ourselves during the live. And then we're like, okay, how fast can we grab this 5 piece of content, like 5-minute piece of content?
Yeah.
Cut it up in little pieces, no edited, just the landscape version. And then how long does it take us to distribute? Take your time. For us was about 30 minutes to do about like 3 cuts, right? And then there's different tools and that you can leverage on your own. Some like Descript, V.io. They can reach out if they want to do it themselves. There's a few resources out there, but I highly recommend plan that out. And then if they have a good output, if you have like a good output, a clear objective, your team is going to be able to do it for you.
Structure is key at the end of the day, right? You know, based on your experience on the podcast, we always do the same intro, right? And, you know, even though we deeply appreciate your reaction, like we've got similar reactions, right? From other people that they come and they're like, that is the best intro I've gotten in my life. And we're like, yes, awesome. Team, cut that part, right? It's like, let's leverage that. So we know like the intro is important. And then at the end of the podcast, we have the same questions that we ask every time. And those have a purpose as well, right? One of the questions that we ask you was, where would you be if you didn't publish? And you were like, wow, that's a good question, right?
It makes me emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole idea is we crafted that question specifically because it speaks to the people that are on the fence, whether they should publish or not. And it's like, hey, look, this is how your life, just like you shared with us on the story at the store, that the lady, you know, help you see that future of what would it be if you didn't take action. And that's what we're trying to do, right? So we got that structure within our podcast. And regardless if it is a 1-hour podcast or 10-minute, you know, video, if you have a structure, it's going to facilitate the multi-purposing, right? Whether you're doing it yourself or you're handing that to the team. Not too long ago, we actually had another show called Content Bites, and it was just a live on Instagram for 20 minutes with very specific questions. And we know like every question had a purpose, and we know exactly that we could multi-purpose every section of the show as well. So a structure is key. If you just want to ramble, then what I recommend is just hire somebody that literally either is there with you as you are talking and they're taking notes of, oh, these are the good parts. And then they go and edit everything. Cool. Or there's a process after that for them to do that.
Yeah. Hey, that's fantastic too, right there. Have someone from your team listening in and marking everything. Really good. Mm-hmm. I could talk to you guys forever. I love your energy. I love your story. I love your enthusiasm and passion. And I do have like rapid questions for you at the end, but I want to ask one last question. And this is a question similar to what I get asked a lot. So for years, I worked with my husband in my business. He works with me a little bit in my business today. And people are always so curious about that dynamic of working with somebody that you love and that you're related to. What are some things that you guys have found that allow you to continue to have that strong brother relationship and not have business get in the way of that, but at the same time allows you to communicate and thrive and grow your business together?
That's a great question.
Yeah. You want to go first, or you want me to go first?
I think you got a pretty good answer for this one.
I think number one is understanding that we're family. So family, at least in our culture, is the top, right? It is always priority. So when we started, we actually had a conversation where like, this was not right when we started. This was like when we started to see a lot of friction in different things.
Okay.
That we're like, hey, no matter what, like we're brothers first, right? So that is always a priority and is always in our heads. So whenever there's an argument, we have to look past that and be like, is this affecting our brother's relationship, right? Our brotherhood. And if it is, then we have to be very honest with ourselves and tackle that conversation. And after that is like, okay, how can we create a system? And this was not like a one-day thing. This was like a few years having conversations. How can we create a system where we can rely on, like, if we don't agree on something, right? Yes. So within our own business, we have daily huddles with the team that we, address different things. We have a meeting, a weekly meeting that we do is like an hour and a half where we like handle, like it's full open, but like, hey, I do not agree with this. These are the reasons. And we're still working through it, right? It's not perfect, but we're still do that.
Yeah. We still get upset. Like,
yeah, I personally, like, this is funny. I personally get very, very defensive when I think about an idea and I start implementing it, right? And then Fonzi gives me feedback. I get very defensive. So the first step is identifying that and be like, okay, and explain to me why, and then we can work it out. But at first, that was not the thing. And Fonzi had to be very clear with me, be like, dude, like you get so defensive and like you shut down immediately after you do that, and recognizing that and just putting your ego aside for a little bit, and then be like having that conversation, be like, okay, where's that coming from? And coming out with different mini frameworks, right? Like, how do we make decisions together? Well, if we agree, or we don't disagree, or if we don't agree, like what's happening?
Yeah.
If you're bringing an idea to the table, is it just an idea, or have you tested out for a week and we have the results and then we can implement? Like, what are the things? What are the micro frameworks that we're gonna base our business relationship and operate?
I mean, I think an important one is if we bring a problem to the table, and we actually like rolled this to the team out, was like, if you're going to bring a problem to the table, you got to bring solutions. Like, if there is no solutions, do not bring this to the discussion, because we're not even going to talk about it. We're just going to skip through it. And we're probably going to tell you, okay, come back with solutions, right? And it's the same. So part of what my brother is saying, communication obviously is key number one, right? At first, actually, we kind of discovered that we were just doing the same role. We were literally both jumping on the same sales calls. We were both like, we were doing the same exact thing. And one day we look at each other and we're like, dude, have you realized that there's two of us? It's like, and we're two of us and we're doing one thing. Like, why don't we leverage our individual capacities to do more, right? And then we started realizing too, he has a zone of genius and I have a completely different zone of genius, right? And so he operates way better than me, honestly. And I'm a little bit more of a dreamer up there. But we've noticed too that at times I ground myself a little bit more and I do work, and he goes up and he dreams as well, right? So I think it's just getting to realize that those moments are going to exist. Also accept that there are going to be challenges. At the end of the day, it's never going to be perfect. And you just got to be willing to work through them. Like my brother said, have some frameworks for coming up with solutions, or at the worst case scenario, agree on, okay, if there is no decision to be, like if we are not in agreement, no matter what, you get to pick whatever the decision is, but it cannot be like based on ego, right? Like, I'm okay with letting you take the decision that is going to drive us forward, for example. So again, it does take a lot. Sometimes we've got pretty mad at each other. But at the end of the day, what is the common good that we're working for, right? For us is we want to help the rest of the family, right? We want to eventually provide for our parents and either bring them here or just take them to wherever they want to go. And that is the major goal. So guess what? If we're fighting and discussing and spending our energy, right? We talk about energy on that instead of actually solving the challenge, we're not gonna get anywhere.
Yeah. So many great nuggets in that. And for anybody who's not working for family, even just having any sort of a business partner, you've got to understand how to communicate like that. You have to recognize when your ego is getting in the way and understand how to put it aside. And even having those systems and processes for when things don't go the way, like when we're not all getting along, because that will happen, right? That will happen. There will come a time when you just can't agree. And so when that happens, what are we going to do? And what's kind of the next steps at that point? So there's a lot of wisdom in there. Super good. Yeah. Okay, let's move into our rapid questions for you guys, and we'll have you each individually answer.
I'm already sweating.
Fonzi gets the sweaty pits every time he gets rapid fire questions.
It's not my forte.
Let's start with Luis, and then we'll go to Fonzi. So, Luis, what is something that you do consistently every day?
Yeah. Smile. Lately, I've been like very aware of smiling. Can I add a second one to that?
Right, go for it.
Be saying out loud what we're grateful for. We do that in our daily huddle every single day. each one of us in our team. So
So good. I really like that. That's an amazing way to start your daily huddle.
Yeah, it was very weird at first. When we proposed to the team, but we're like, there's no this is a dictatorship at this point. Like we're just gonna do this. But they loved it, and we've been doing it for like 2 years now, which is awesome.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, Fonzie, what's something you do consistently every day?
Does work fall in that category? Coffee. I do coffee every day. I mean, start the day with gratitude as well. And I know this is not the question, but I would like to add more physical exercise on a daily basis. You know, we went from playing soccer pretty much every day to now just working every day.
Exercising the fingers, the keyboard.
Hey, now I'm confused. Are you actually exercising every day?
No. That's what I would like to add. Yeah, I added to the question. I told you, I'm terrible at rapid fire questions. It's not.
Katie, he caved after the first question. What's happening?
Not that you would like to add that you also are exercising every day. Someday you would like to be also exercising every day. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, I get it now. I see you. Okay, that was fantastic. Okay, what is a book that you have on your nightstand that you frequently revisit?
I don't have books on my nightstand that I frequent revisit. That's the thing. But I love audiobooks, and at night I like fiction. So to disconnect. So currently I'm listening to Inferno from Dan Brown. Because I loved Da Vinci Code and all those. So that's what I'm currently listening to when I walk the dog at night.
Cool. I love it. And I think that's so important. Sometimes we can have information overload, too many YouTube instructional videos, too many podcasts sometimes, and too much information. And so taking that time to disconnect and finding something that you enjoy as you walk the dog, that's fantastic. I love it.
Thank you.
Hey, Fonzie, what about you? What's a book that you revisit?
It's funny that you just mentioned that word, because this year for me is the year of revision. Actually, this is what I wrote at the beginning of the year, because okay, first I'm gonna apologize because I know this is rapid fire, but I'm extending a little bit. But but growing up, I actually didn't enjoy reading that much at all, because I mean, and I love my dad. Dad, I love you. Thank you so much. But I know he had the best intentions, but every time he grounded me, he was like, lock yourself in the room and read. So I always saw reading as a punishment, right? Yeah. And I actually didn't start reading voraciously. I think that's a word. My pronunciation is not the best one in there. But after I started, the entrepreneurship journey, I was like, wow, I can learn from other people. This is absolutely amazing, right? Yeah. And that's when I started reading a lot of books. So up until this year, my emphasis was, let me just grab any book and learn as much as I can. And then I realized, like, wow, there's only a very few amount of books that I can actually quote things from, or, make reference to, that I've learned. And I know I've read some incredible books that every time I see them, I get the feelings like, wow, I learned so much from that book. And then when I think, what did I learn? I'm like, that's rough. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly what I learned from that book. So that's why this year is the year of revision, is because I want to grab those books, at least the top ones, and revisit them. Now, that being said, one of those top books is called Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer. That's actually the first book that my mom gave me when I came to the US. She's like, read this. It's absolutely amazing. I didn't read it for like the first 3 years. And then when I read it, I was like, this is absolutely amazing. So yeah, I definitely recommend that one.
Say the title of that book again. I didn't catch it.
Your Erroneous Zones
by Wayne Dyer.
Yeah.
Sons or souls?
Zones.
Yeah.
With a Z.
Your erroneous zones.
Yes.
Correct.
Our English is not very good looking at the moment. We apologize.
Yeah, some words are still difficult to pronounce.
Erroneous zones. Okay, I'm really curious about that one.
Yeah,
cool.
It's really good. It's just about taking ownership of your life. And I mean, we mentioned this quite a few times, but we're very grateful that our mom instilled this mindset that, hey, everything happens for a reason and it's always for the best of reasons, but it's kind of up to us to look for that reason, right? It's not like, oh, I'm just going to wait for something good to happen.
Yeah.
And that book goes perfectly, along those lines. And honestly, if you're like feeling down or, maybe you're not happy with the life that you're living at the moment, like that is a really good book that just makes you look inside, ask some deep questions, and reconsider some things.
Do we have 2 minutes for a story? Like this is going to illustrate that. Like
or the worst
story. Yes.
Okay. So in the reason I decided to come to the States is not soccer, right? Like we talked a little bit about this, but it was a situation that happened in our country that we felt like it was like the worst thing that it could happen at the time. A lot of my friends, like we go to school, the government was taking over, like they would bring like the military into the school, was crazy situations. And we were part of a student movement. And just for asking people to go vote, they were chasing us, right? So there were like these episodes. And it was very, very intense. And we were 18, 19 at the time. And you're living like that situation. So we're like, okay, we need to leave the country. When the decision was made, I go back to playing, right? And I get a soccer scholarship in West Texas in AM. And my mom continues to like put this message in our heads, right? Of, hey, everything happens for a reason. And so on. I'm so excited. We got the scholarship. Paperwork is being sent to our house for us to sign the whole thing. And that was the last day of the semester. It was like my first year in college there. And I was working for Red Bull and I had to go to this party to promote the beverage with the team. And I'm taking a shower in a friend's house. And all of a sudden this glass door explodes, right? Just like tempered glass. I literally touch it and it just falls. And I'm like, oh man, my initial thought is like, the mom of my friend is going to kill me, right? And then I look down and there's a red puddle and the water is like running. And I notice out of my foot, there's like this squirt of blood coming out of the top of my foot. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So anyways, finally we get in, there's the doctors in the house because they were having like a family reunion. There were doctors, they what? Did I say it right?
Is that what you're trying to say? Suture?
Yeah, exactly. So they close it. They close the one there, but it got infected. And with the infection, I had to go get surgery like 2 weeks after because the infection was so big. So then we notified the college and we're like, hey, guys, this happened. I'm going to, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get there at this date, but we're booking flights for X amount. And they're like, I am sorry, we're pulling the scholarship away. And at that time, we're completely shattered, right?
Yeah.
Because we're like, this is my way out. I don't know what's going to happen. So I was sitting on a couch for about 3-4 months without moving my leg because the operation, they had to remove tissue and it was a whole thing. And I couldn't even walk. So I'm like, this is done. This is over, right? I'm not going to the US. I don't know. I am accepting my fate that I'm going to stay here in this country, maybe go out later with different things. That was something really hard to like swallow at the time. Well, guess what? A year later, same situation with the politics and so on. I was just playing recreationally, and we decided to start cold emailing every single college, D1, D2, D3 here in the United States. We're like last chance to do something. And then an episode happened where kidnapping, sadly, is a very common thing, or it was a very common thing. At the time, I personally got kidnapped for a night. And that started again the search for a new opportunity. And we're like, okay, this is it. It sped up the process of reaching out to colleges, different things. We go back to practice for about a month or two, like very intense to get ready for this. And luckily we got the response from 2 colleges. Fonzi got 2 colleges. I got 2 colleges. And that's the reason we're in the States today with beautiful family, beautiful people. So these very bad situations happen in our country, happen to us. For us to be here today, having this conversation with you and building the business the vehicle that's gonna allow us to move forward. So with, that book that Fonzi's sharing, it means a lot to us because that was kind of like how our mom communicated with us, from the very beginning of stage. And for us, that was very natural. And sometimes we even created a little bit of rejection to it because it was coming from our mom. But then when we're exposed to this world now for example, I have a kid, right? Like that's the example. Those are the things. And now we've seen very bad, very negative situations. And we've been able to, because of that situation, be in a position, a way better position. So we always go back to that thought process whenever we're going through a rough patch in the business. Last year was very rough at moments. We always go back to the situation. It's like, this is happening for us. We have to like, what is the lesson here? And then we move forward. And then, these wonderful things happen. And then the cycle apparently repeats as we grow. And so we're like, okay, where are we going? We're just now we're excited, right? Because we've seen that. So hopefully that serves to illustrate that. Hopefully you don't have to go through very radical like experiences like the ones that we had, but just keep that in mind as you go on your growth journey.
Thank you for sharing that. What an incredible story. And just you highlighting how unfortunate, unexpected things were happening, and how the way that you were framing those situations then allowed you to not just get out of the situation, but you're seeing how ultimately it was part of the journey, and it was part of what has gotten you to where you are right now, which is incredible and beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. And I think an important reminder to every entrepreneur that there is a power and an opportunity for you to frame your business, your situation, your life, what's happening in your world in a way that it continues to propel you forward and not become a disruptor, something that's in the way, something that's pulling you back, but really frame it in a powerful way. So good. I love it.
Thank you for allowing us to share. Thank you, Fonzi, for priming those.
Yeah, we totally messed up the rapid fire questions.
Yeah. Sorry,
team.
What?
It was fantastic. It was fantastic. And I think that that's where we should end those rapid fire questions. Well, let me ask you one last question.
Sounds good.
And you can answer this in any way that you want.
Thank you.
But what's working right now?
In what context?
She said anyway.
Well,
I stopped from asking that question. Yeah.
Okay. Personally, I think we might have different answers for this one, right? Personally, in the last month, I felt a very strong support system. So I think what's working right now is just like taking care of those people that you love, and paying attention to those relationships, right? I mean, that was part of the topic of today's conversation, because it's just not love from my family, which I experienced massive love, last week. Also accompanied with like lots of gratitude. Based on what my brother said, obviously we're here as internationals, so as immigrants, and I'm dealing with some paperwork, right? And I had a crazy experience last week that I was so grateful for, right? So for me, it's just, I don't know, setting your intentions and being a little bit more present is working. I know it might not be the answer, the technical answer that some people might be waiting for or wishing for, right? I'm telling you, like, oh yeah, repurpose into 5 different pieces of content, right? Yeah. But just the fact of being connected with the people on your support system, it has been very special for me lately.
Awesome. Thanks, Fonzi. What about you, Luis? What's working now?
Consistency has been a big word for me the last 2 years, especially after 5 of those previous years, just trying a bunch of things. So it starts, I'm going to relate it to what we do with content, right? For us, that's the thing that changed everything, and that that got us our first footing, like with traction. And it meant so much. And it was because we were consistent. It didn't matter the vehicle. It didn't matter if it was a podcast. It didn't matter if it was a TikTok video. It didn't matter, right? For us, was just the fact of doing. And we've applied that to obviously different parts of the business. Some very good, some not so good. And we always revisit, like, the question is, are we actually being consistent? And I want to take a step further, and is with my life also, with like, am I being consistent communication with my wife? Am I being consistent smiling and with my son? Like we have this little nighttime routine that we do where it's like we brush his teeth and like he chooses his toothbrush and then he goes and sees some bubbles and then we wash his hands and then he wants to play sleep, right? And we do this about 8:30 p.m. at night. And there's some days that I'm exhausted and I still like, I gotta go and walk the dog. And you know, if I play that scenario in my head, I'm going to bed 10:30, 11:30 at night, right? And I'm like, man, tomorrow I have to be up at 5 because I want to be early and I will do this, right? And then it's like, am I gonna cut this short or am I gonna be consistent, being a good parent and living in the moment because I don't want to miss any single second with him. And you know, it's funny because I have this conversation with my wife. Her name is also Katie, but Caitlin, actually, I would call her Katie. But I'm like, she's like, I don't understand what you guys do up there every night. And we spend like 45 minutes to an hour doing this whole thing. And with her, she's like very to the point, right? And she has her own routine with Luca, right? But and I'm like, I just don't want to miss those moments, man. Like it's just like, and I just want to be consistent with that. And the temptation always comes, right? And I guess I play that scenario with Luca because it's what I do almost every single day with him. And I miss it when I don't, right? Like when I'm not here at home, I really, really miss it. So it's like, okay, how can I translate that into my day-to-day, whether it's my private life and my business? How can I actually be consistent, right? Because we're only in the moment once, right? And there's so much distraction. So if we focus on that consistency, it's gonna help us a lot. So I don't know where it's gonna go, but I'm sure it's gonna go according to our past. We've done better and better. So we're just gonna continue with that, that trend.
So much wisdom. There was so much wisdom in that response. I really appreciated it. The response of being present. And Luis, I love hearing that your nighttime routine with your son. I mean, how beautiful is that? That like gets me emotional. My oldest is a senior in high school. And I check in on him still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my youngest is 8. We still read stories at night. Yeah. So don't give it up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't ever have to give up that nighttime routine. And I think it's easy, like you were talking about, there's those days where you're just tired and you feel like I've got so much that I have to do tomorrow. I don't have time for this. And I taught myself that like, these are the moments you never get back.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes it all worth it. Yeah. Yep. So incredible. Clearly you moved me to tears. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Make us cry too over here, man. What's happening?
Someday, Fonzi, you'll understand.
Someday.
Oh, yeah.
But thank you. I love listening to this.
You know what? Honestly, as you shared that story, it took me back to this time when life was just so busy. And I went to go to bed and my husband asked me, he said, did you check in on the boys? I had 2 kids upstairs, 2 kids downstairs, and I started to get lazy and I would tuck in the 2 that were upstairs and I would not tuck in the ones downstairs. And he said, did you go see them? And I was like, no. And he just gave me this look and he's like, Katie, they need you.
Yep.
And I made a decision there that I wasn't going to forget that anymore. Yeah. And it's just been so special to watch the relationship develop over time because you take that time to be present with them.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hello. We just ended our podcast in tears. For everybody who is either wanting your services or just wants a piece of this awesome energy that you guys have, what's the best place for them to follow you? Listen to them on Content is Profit. Where else do you guys publish?
Yeah, we're present in probably every platform, but our main thing is Instagram. So at @BaseBrosco, that's where we kind of communicate. So send us a DM. It's not a random VA, it's us. So so I think that's the main way. And if you want to listen to the show, which by the way, your episode is coming out in a week or so, you can find it in Content is Profit. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. You can go to contentisprofit.com and then you'll be connected.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, Luis, and thank you, Fonzi. And for everybody who's listening, this is what's working now.